If you didn't get a chance to yesterday, give your mug a quick sponge bath before you start glazing. If you glazed your mug yesterday, do not give it another sponge bath. Just pick up where you left off and make sure you give your mug 3 good coats of glaze. After you've washed your mug, you're ready to choose your first glaze color. I'm going to go with a Fantasia glaze. Now this glaze looks red, but make sure you pay attention to the picture on the label because after it comes out of the kiln, it's going to look like that bluish green color. And that's because of the chemical changes that will happen when that glaze gets up to around 2000 degrees. To paint your glaze on your mug, first you have to get your work area set up. Place your mug on top of a piece of newspaper and make sure you have a brush. Now we're ready to begin painting. You need to paint the inside of your mug, the inside of the handle, all parts except for the very bottom of your mug. No glaze down there. If you put glaze on the bottom of your mug, it can cause your mug to stick in the kiln. Once you've decided on your glaze color for your first layer, open up the glaze and begin stirring it up. Make sure you stir your glaze from the bottom, and it should end up being the consistency of a milkshake you could drink through a straw. About like that. That looks good. Once your glaze has a good consistency, you can begin painting it. Take your brush, dip it in the glaze, and begin making back and forth brush strokes on your cup. Make sure you have enough glaze on your brush. If you don't actually have much on your brush at all, you'll end up with a very thin layer like that. And that won't be enough glaze for it to actually turn glossy when we put it in the kiln. On the flip side of that, you also don't want to paint with too much glaze on your brush. It'll make a big mess, you'll end up with drips and wasting glaze onto your newspaper, and this can also create a layer of glaze that is too thick and can actually melt off your cup in the kiln. Just use a reasonable, medium amount of glaze on your brush at a time and scrape any extra glaze on your brush off against the lid of the glaze container. Paint all parts of your mug, including the inside and the handle, until you cannot see any of the clay itself, except at the very bottom of your mug, which you don't want to paint at all. Once you finish your first layer, let the glaze dry until it looks and feels dry and powdery. You'll notice little chunks in your glaze. They look like little rocks. These are little hunks of colored glass that will melt and explode into a color burst on the side of your mug when they go into the kiln, so leave those on there. And now I'm ready for my second layer of glaze. I could do another layer of Fantasia, but I'm going to add some variety by going for this Buttercup Yellow. Remember to stir your glaze up and make sure that it has the consistency of a milkshake. And then begin painting another layer across the entire mug. The inside, the handle. The only thing you don't need to paint is the very bottom, and then let it dry. Your second layer will take longer to dry than your first did. And you can really start to see those little chunks of colored glass. Once your second layer is dry, you're ready for your third and final layer. I'm going to use a raspberry colored glaze for my last layer. You have to get 3 layers of glaze on your mug for it to turn glossy in the kiln. If you only get 2, the glaze will never turn into that glassy look. It will just stay in this chalky, powdery state. So I'm going to use the glaze. I'm going to make sure I get over my entire mug, using a medium amount of glaze on the brush at a time so that it's not too sloppy or too thin. Once you have 3 layers of glaze on your mug and the layers are completely dry, check the bottom of your mug. Even though we tried to not get any paint on the bottom, there will probably be some. So go ahead and wet a rag. Hold that rag on a perfectly flat hand, and then use your other hand to grab your mug and twist it back and forth on top of the rag. It's important to keep your hand super flat as you do this. If you curl your hand up like that, you'll end up accidentally wiping glaze off the side of your mug, and that's not good. So on a perfectly flat hand, twist the mug back and forth, checking it to see if it's completely clean. Keep going until you've gotten all the glaze off the bottom of your mug so that it doesn't stick to the kiln, and you'll be done. The glazed mugs will go back into the kiln, and when they come out, they'll be glossy and shiny, and they will look amazing. And we'll test them out next week.